It's very bright up here. Good evening, everyone. My name is Morgan. I work at the Met, and I'd like to welcome you to the group Spectrum's second event, Moth at the Met American Stories. I trust everyone had a good time at drinking their harpoon beer and wine at the Temple of Dender. So thank you for joining us for that. I want to take just a few seconds to tell you about Spectrum. It's a collaboration of about 25 different employees of the Met whose goal is to give fresh perspectives on our collection and exhibitions. We hope to have a lot more events coming up in 2010, so definitely check back. metmuseum.org/spectrum. You can sign up for our mailing list, hear about other events such as this one. And we're really excited tonight to be working with the Moth on this event. They are, for those of you who don't know, which I'm sure is very few in the room, an acclaimed nonprofit organization dedicated to the art of storytelling. The Moth has presented more than 3,000 stories told live without notes from people of all walks of life. And they have recently launched a public radio show, which is licensed by over 200 stations nationwide. And I'd like to introduce you to our host tonight, Jonathan Ames. Give him a round of applause. He is the author of multiple novels and collections, most recently including The Double Life is Twice as Good. The film adaptation of his novel, The Extra Man, starring Kevin Kline, John C. Reilly, Katie Holmes, and Paul Dano, will be released in 2010. He's also the creator of the new HBO comedy Bored to Death, starring Jason Schwartzman and Ted Danson, which will begin its second season next year. So please give me a warm welcome for Jonathan Ames.
Thank you, Morgan. Okay, let me adjust this mic. I was told not to touch the top part. Now I'm struggling with the bottom part, so let's all have a moment of meditation and think about the holidays while I fumble here. Okay. All right, so welcome to the Moth at the Met. Tonight's show is called American Stories. And just briefly, for those of you who might be at the Moth for the first time, to reiterate a little bit of what Morgan just said, the Moth is a nonprofit storytelling organization dedicated to bringing stories wherever it can go. It's always true stories from people's lives. So people come up here and they tell true stories from their lives, and they don't read, and they might practice it a little bit, but they're not going from a script. It is awfully bright, actually. I know there's about 500 people here, and I see maybe one person's forehead, and so it's a little bit eerie. Okay, mic troubles aside, visibility problems aside, I'll keep going forward. It's just I really did feel like I was talking into a void here. I'm like, wow. Okay, a near-death experience on stage, but with like 6 bright white lights. All right, going forward. What else can I tell you about the Moth? One of the beautiful things about the Moth is that it has what's called outreach programs into the community to help people, could be students, people in halfway houses, or all sorts of different communities to bring storytelling and how empowering storytelling can be. The Moth was founded 12 years ago by George Dawes Green. Let's hear it for George Dawes Green. George grew up down south, and there was a big tradition where he grew up of storytelling, and when he came to New York, he found that there was a lot of vapid conversation at cocktail parties, like what may have happened earlier. No, I'm sure it was completely enlightened, as it was by Egyptian ruins and all that. But, and so he wanted to bring heartfelt storytelling to New York, and had this incredibly inspired idea of just gathering people initially at different bars around Manhattan to tell stories from their lives. And here we are, 12 years later, 3,000 stories, a radio show. So let's hear it for George and the Moth. One of the things that's great about the Moth is that, and I often say this when I host, but you know, if you attend a reading, let's say, and you're hearing your favorite author, they invariably seem to go probably about 15 minutes or 20 minutes too long. The first 10 minutes, you're with them, you're enjoying them, you're admiring them, you might be having private thoughts, but it's all, you know, it's all working for the, and then around the 15-minute mark, you're going, God, don't they realize we're getting a little bored and I lost whatever tangent they're on? Around the 25-minute mark, you've completely lost your mind and are having all sorts of ulcers and, well, I don't want to, or cancers form, but hopefully not. But it just becomes very difficult, especially if you're codependent like me, because I'm both feeling angry at the person and then upset for them, knowing that all the other people are angry at them. But what happens at the Moth that doesn't happen, because around the 10-minute mark, Maz will let the storyteller know that it's time to wind up by doing that. Right. So then the storyteller's like, okay, this is my time to wrap up, but then if they do get caught up in a self-centered, you know, vortex, around the 11 or 12-minute mark, Maz will begin to compete with them. And I've always thought of the movie Deliverance, but this is, of course, much more benign, whatever happened in that film. And then the storyteller will wind up. So you will not go into any kind of codependent hell here tonight. Around 12 minutes, the person will wind up, but I'm sure the story will be beautiful. Now, about the theme, and then we'll be getting into the show. The theme is America, and I called Catherine about 40 minutes ago, and because normally it always says in the host notes, muse on the theme, and I said, Catherine, America is a very large theme, like what should I do? And she very quickly and sweetly came up, she remembered one of my stories. So on the subway up here, I kind of put it together a little bit in my mind. So here's just a brief, my own little story that might touch on this very broad and democratic theme of America. So quickly, and this will be like a footnotes version because I'm the host and we have to keep moving, but in 1985, I was 21, and I was at a very American summer camp called Camp Walt Whitman. It's about as American and as literary as you can get. It was supposed to be non-competitive, but we did keep score in the softball game, so I don't know why they said that. One night I was feeling very ill. It turned out I had salmonella poisoning, and I went up to the nurse's cabin, and I asked for an aspirin, and she was 13 or 14 years older than me, but quite lovely. And she went to get an aspirin. A bat flew at us. This was in the woods of New Hampshire, also very American, and we held each other because of the bat. I was, well, I wasn't an urban person. I was suburban, but I was frightened by the bat. So I held on to this nurse, and then grew more masculine as the night went on, and we made love, and then I became very ill the next 2 weeks, and we parted amicably. She felt a little embarrassed because I was quite a bit younger. And then 2 years later, summer of 1987, I got a letter in the mail from her with a picture of a beautiful red-haired, blue-eyed baby boy. And at the time, he was 15 months old. She hadn't thought to tell me at first because she knew I was in college, but then she realized I should know, so she sent me this letter with this picture of this beautiful baby boy, that, like I said, beautiful red hair, at which point when I saw that, my beautiful red hair immediately ejected from my head. This was a little overwhelming. But and I'd also just sold my first novel, so this was all a bit much, but I rallied, and very shortly thereafter, I became a part-time single dad at the age of 23, then 24. And so the little story I'm going to tell you, that was sort of the preface. So in 1989, it was Christmas time. My son was 3 years old. He was living down in Florida. I was living in Princeton, New Jersey. And I wanted to get to him, but I had very little money. I was driving a taxi at the time, but I managed to get to Georgia where the girl I was seeing was with her family. We took a train there, and then from Georgia I was going to go down to Florida by bus. So on, I think, Christmas Eve morning around 6 a.m., I got on a bus in Georgia, and with these boxes of toys I had for my 3-year-old son, and I was heading down to Florida, and got on the bus, and it was a terrible bus ride. Again, very American, Greyhound. They allowed smoking in the bus back then, and I've never liked smoking. I mean, I might like the smell of other people's marijuana smoke, but I've never really enjoyed cigarette tobacco. My father used to smoke cigars and make me very ill. And anyway, but that's an Oedipal story for another night. So I'm in this bus. It's full of smoke. I'm kind of, you know, it was supposed to be about a 12-hour bus ride. Became very rainy, torrential rains all the way down. The young girl sitting next to me, I thought on the subway I would say, well, she was 18. I think, in fact, she was maybe 15. But she fell asleep next to me, and I could smell her scalp, and it was incredibly rich. It smelled like childhood, and I kept sniffing it, but I felt guilty that I was sniffing her scalp, but I was kind of using it to combat all the cigarette smoke. And she slept for hours on my shoulder, and anyway, so we get to Florida, incredible rains, and the bus stops. We're at a bus station, and we're about 50 or 60 miles from where my son lived in Central Florida, kind of in the middle of nowhere, and it seems like the bus isn't going any further. And I say to the driver, what's happening? He's like, this is the last stop. I go into the station, which is closing down. I said, I'm supposed to be getting to Winter Park. What's happening? And they said, oh, this is a holiday schedule. The bus stops here. And I was like, oh my God. And it's pouring rain. It was maybe 7 o'clock at night. And my son's mother was away, and he was with his grandmother, this elderly violin teacher who had very frail nerves. And this was before cell phones, and it's 7 o'clock at night, pouring rain, pitch blackout. I'm about 60 miles from where I need to be. I call the home phone, but there was no answer, and they didn't even have an answering machine back then. This was 1989. And I had no way to leave her a message. With the bus station manager, his lights are going down, people are leaving. He called the other station. The other station was closed. And so then now the whole place is dark. He gets in his car and said, I'm sorry, I've got to go. My family's waiting for me. It's Christmas Eve. And he drives off. And I'm like under this little overhang, pouring rain, my 2 boxes of toys. And I thought, oh, I don't know what's going to happen. This is what I get for sniffing that girl's scalp for hours. It was completely rude of me and a little bit erotic even. And I shouldn't have been sniffing her scalp. And now I'm in the middle of Florida. I have no way. I called, there was like one taxi that the manager told me about, but they weren't operating on Christmas Eve. So I'm sitting there in the rain, had no idea what to do. I thought I'll go to the police. I'll just spend the night at a police station. But I was feeling I was despairing, and I felt somehow that it was because that there was something wrong with me, that I wasn't going to make it to my son on Christmas Eve. I felt full of guilt and shame for whatever reason. When things go bad, the self-loathing just came up like a tide all over me. And I was standing there, and then suddenly there were headlights on me, and it was the bus manager. He had come back. He said, you know what? I couldn't leave you here on the rain and Christmas Eve. I'll drive you to the next station, over an hour away. And I thanked him profusely, got in the cab, his car. It turned out to be an incredibly boring human being. I mean, he really destroyed me for the next hour talking about the politics at the station, but I was happy to endure it, and got his name and wrote a big letter to Greyhound talking about what a wonderful human being he was. And so this was an incredibly Jimmy Stewart American moment. So then when we pulled up to the other station where the grandmother was sitting there, with my 3-year-old son, they'd been waiting probably 2 hours or more in the rain, and they didn't know what to do. And then when my son saw me, when I got out of the car, his eyes lit up. I mean, with such love, and he still remembers this. It's one of his first memories because they'd been trapped in this car. The grandmother must have been getting increasingly worried. And then when I came walking over with these boxes of toys, he just lit up, and it was one of his first memories that he still has to this day. And so that's my little Jimmy Stewart American story. Thank you for listening. Okay, well, we're going to get the show started, and so at the Moth, we never do lengthy bios for people, though I had a little bit of one, but for the storytellers, usually not, and you can read about them in your programs, but we always like to ask them a question related to the theme. And tonight's theme is America, and so I asked each storyteller their favorite state. And our first storyteller said that his favorite state is New Jersey because that's where I'm from. And then he proceeded to show me a beautiful tattoo of the Garden State over his heart. And I love that because I'm from New Jersey. So please welcome to the stage Peter Aguero.
I'll just leave that open. Ladies. It's my wife back there. So this is a reading from the book of Peter, chapter 19, verse 2. I was 19 years old and I had just finished my first semester at college, and I got home with my bag of laundry, and things weren't looking too good for me and my mom. I walked into the house, and she had told me over that semester to expect some changes when I got home, and it didn't really hit me until I walked in the door, and the first thing that I saw was that her upright piano that she had had since she was a kid was gone. She had sold it. I walked through the foyer into the living room, and there was just a broken couch and a television on top of another television. One had a working picture and the other had working sound. And all the other furniture was gone. My dad had taken it 4 years ago when he had left, and for some reason the impressions from his lazy boy were still there as some kind of reminder of what a dick he is. And I walked up, passed through the living room, and went up through toward the dining room, and the beautiful dining room set that had been in her family for generations was gone. It was a dark mahogany set, really ornate, and with these beautiful carved chairs and a glass break front and a buffet table, and that was gone. And I walked upstairs to put my stuff away, and her bedroom door was open, and the only thing left in the room was her bed. Her bedroom set was gone. There's nothing more depressing than a bedroom with no furniture. You can see all the little dings and mistakes and tears in the wallpaper that are hidden by things. And then I saw in my sister's room, it was still a shrine to my sister that had moved in with my dad, with her Pepto-Bismol pink walls and her canopy bed and her toy box, like she was going to move back and become a little child again, but she wasn't. My bedroom was just the way it always was. We got covered in posters with broken particle board furniture and a water bed for some reason. With a broken heater, so you had to put quilts on top of it so you wouldn't get arthritis. She couldn't sell any of that anyway. I told my mother for years after the divorce to just sell the house. It was too big for the two of us after my sister left, and it was especially too big once I was gone, when I went to college. And the bills had to have been killing her. But her stubborn Polish pride kept her in the house. I guess she wanted to show to the outside world that everything was okay, but on the inside it was just kind of decaying around her. But she wasn't able to really deal with it in any kind of a real way. There was just selling things and taking it day by day. She was a nurse, she still is, and at the time she was working on the weekends doing 24, 40 shifts at a dual diagnosis psychiatric drug unit, and during the week she took a job at a perfume counter in the mall to make some extra money, and she doesn't like people telling her when to take a break. So that wasn't gonna last long. This is a Polak, a strong, big-headed, pumpkin-headed Polak. She got home that day, and she was happy to see me. Not as effusive as usual, but she made dinner. She made a tomato casserole that she always made with canned tomatoes, Wonder Bread, and American cheese. Yeah. And we sat in the kitchen on the two chairs on the kitchen table, because the other chair I broke, and the other chair I also broke, and we ate our food, and we kind of talked about, college that semester being over, and she said, "Peter, we can't really have much of a Christmas this year. There's not going to be any presents. I got your sister a little something, because she doesn't live here anymore, but we really can't afford any presents. I said, what, are we going to have a tree? She said, well, we can't afford a tree. Decorations, I don't have time to decorate. I'm okay, all right, okay. So she said, I got an idea. I thought this would be funny. Why don't we, over the next 2 weeks, we'll cut out pictures out of catalogs and magazines of things that we would give to each other if we could. Oh, go ahead. And we laughed about it, and then we cried about it. And then we laughed about it again, because if you don't laugh about it, you're going to eat a bullet. So the next morning, she went off to work, and I throw myself into Christmas, and I decided I was going to go get a tree, and I was going to make this the best Christmas I possibly could. So I went. This is down in South Jersey, a small town, and this was before Walmart and Home Depot and outlet stores were down there. So there was one Christmas tree farm, the DeBolt Christmas tree farm. So I went over there figuring they'd give me a deal because I used to date their daughter, but turns out they didn't give me a deal because I used to date their daughter. And the tree was like $60. I was like, screw that. So I went back home and I got a hacksaw and I cut out a tree from my side yard. And it wasn't even like a pine tree. It was some kind of like stunted maple tree. And I brought it in the house and I put it in the tree holder in the stand. And I went up in the attic and I got the box of decorations and ornaments. And I hung there were about 6 branches. I put about 20 ornaments on each branch. And then I just took the tangled lights and I just threw them on it. And it was beautiful, it was really kind of nice. She came home and, she was, I guess, happy, and that was how that was. And I just started throwing myself into this project of giving my mother everything I possibly could give her for Christmas. She always wanted a forest green Jaguar convertible, so I cut out one of those. And then she wanted a jacuzzi, had a shower called the J Dream with about 20 nozzles and like a little dude that made sandwiches. And like I cut out one of those. And like gold and diamonds and jewelry and a new vacuum cleaner and everything she could ever possibly want in the world. And I really kind of sunk myself into it. I was, I'd go over, hang out at my friends' houses and like kind of take their mom's Currier and Ives catalogs and get all these catalogs and magazines so I could give my mom the best Christmas ever, And I felt like I was in a kind of bizarro O. Henry novel, and one that he never should have written. And that just kind of consumed me over the next, couple weeks. And I figured, this is sad, but this is beautiful, and we're going to connect over this, and it's going to be okay. It's going to be fine. It was one night in between coming home and Christmas, and the two of us were sitting watching the Charlie Brown Christmas special, and one of the TVs was on cable and the other was on broadcast, so like the video was a little ahead of the audio because the audio was on broadcast, but you just pretend, I don't know, you're in Japan, it doesn't matter, so we're watching that, and my mom was so distracted, she was there, but she wasn't there. And, my mother and I were like partners. When my parents' marriage broke up, she still feels guilty to this day about maybe making me grow up sooner than I did as being the man of the house or whatever. And we were friends and roommates and partners. It was me and her against the world. And she was the one I always loved coming home to, and the one that would let me get away with anything, and the one that would always be the one to be proud of me when I did something right and would take a day off from work and drive to the zoo with me when I did something wrong. And she was not there anymore. This house was crushing her, just crushing her, and all because she couldn't see the option of getting rid of it. And it was killing me, man. That's my road dog. That's my mom, That's my girl. And I lost her. She just wasn't there anymore. And it was just killing me. Her eyes were just empty, She was in another world. And she was worried about things that she couldn't figure out how to fix. So on Christmas Eve, I went with my buddy Brian. We got drunk on a jug of Livingston Cellars wine and went to midnight mass. Because when you're under 21 and Catholic, that's where you go to see your friends, you know, because you can't get into the bars yet. And it was great, man. Mass was awesome. My mom didn't go to midnight Mass anymore because 4 years before, when my dad left us, it was during midnight Mass. Yeah, what a dick. Like, as the priest was walking up, he stood up and walked out in front of everyone that we knew, everyone she grew up with, everyone I grew up with, everyone we went to school with, went to church with, hung out with. They all saw our family crumbling in front of us. So my mom doesn't. My dad's a dick. Like, I mean, is he here tonight? No, he's not, because he's a dick. You know what I mean? God. He's such a dick. So my mom doesn't go to midnight Mass anymore. Now, I got home that night, and the next morning, I woke up late, and I brought my little bundles of pictures, tied up with scraps of ribbon, and I put them under the tree, and I waited for my mom to come down, and I heard her stirring upstairs and heard her come down and making coffee, and she came downstairs in her big red Sally Jesse Raphael morning glasses, and she came down with a cup of coffee, and she looked at the things I was offering her, and she just went, wait a minute. And she went back upstairs, and she was up there for a couple minutes. I'm like, how long does it take to bring down some paper? I hope she's okay. She have diarrhea, like it's Christmas, I don't know, like post-traumatic, whatever. But so anyway, she comes back down, and we start to exchange our gifts, and she's opening up a car and a vacuum in the shower and gold and a brand new piano and a bedroom set and a beautiful picture of a dining room set that would be at home in the White House. I tried to give her everything that she had to get rid of to keep this life together. She wanted there, more than anything in the world, she wanted there to be some stability for her kids, to have a place that was always going to be home, the home that we grew up in, and it was killing her, and I was trying to do anything I could to maybe make that better, and so she's just looking at these things and just smiling and laughing, and then I start to open up mine, and there's 3 of them, and there's one, it's a picture of some Reese's peanut butter cups, and a picture of some Homer Simpson slippers, and a picture of a karaoke machine. All from the same Rite Aid catalog that was up in her bathroom upstairs, because she completely forgot. And this thing that I really thought it was just, it was the one-sided thing. And she's laughing about it now, over there. That's hilarious. Yeah, wave. And then so she went upstairs to make breakfast in the kitchen, and I sat there, and it was just kind of I don't know, like I don't want to be too silly about it. It was like a needle piercing me in the heart. Thank you, Maz. And it was just like this life that we had, that was the 2 of us, was just gone. She would have done anything for me. And she still was, but it just wasn't working anymore. And she forgot this thing because the house was killing her, money was killing her, and everything was killing her. There was nothing I could do, just nothing. So I went upstairs, and she did make pancakes. My mom makes really good pancakes. She fries them up in like bacon grease, and they're like, God, they're all crispy around the edges. And she makes me one that's as big as the frying pan and cuts it out to look like Pac-Man and puts it on my plate ever since I was a little boy. And she'll give me a second one if I wanted. But this day, there was no Pac-Man face. It was just silver dollar pancakes, and they were all burnt. And we sat there eating these burnt pancakes, wondering what the hell was going on with our lives. If you today, 14 years later, if you go to my mother's house, where she lives with her new husband, you can go down in the basement and you can kind of see a million boxes, and you walk past the Ark of the Covenant and you go over in the back. And if you were an archaeologist, you could kind of look at the strata of our lives and pick out which year these things happened. And, this is when Peter quit football, and this is when, Michelle had epilepsy growing up, and this is when, their dad was a dick. That's all of them. And then there's one box, if you look at it in Christmas in 1995, if you dig into it, you can see a little velvet bag with a bunch of small pictures cut out of catalogs and magazines. And right underneath of that was stuff that took place a couple months later. I got my belated Christmas present. It was a picture that my mom sent me when I was away at school of her standing in front of the house with a for sale sign in front of it. And she decided to sell the house, and she moved into a small townhouse, and she took a little hit on her pride, but I got my girl back. Thank you.
Peter Aguero. And let's hear it for your mom. All right, thank you, Peter. All right, our next storyteller, when I asked him his favorite state in the Union, at first he wanted perhaps to talk more about a metaphysical state, but then he thought I better follow directions. I said a metaphysical state would be fine, but anyway, but he went with California, which could be metaphysical, and he wrote California, and he said California because it is beautiful and impossible, and wish they all could be. So please welcome to the stage Kyp Malone.
Hello. My fly's not down, right? Okay, good. So, about a month into my daughter's kindergarten career, beginning of her being in school, I was informed by her mother that her teacher was concerned about how she was doing, and a month into kindergarten, you would think that there's not a whole lot that you need to know how to do, but apparently my daughter was giving her teacher cause for concern. And so at the earliest opportunity, which was the parental observation day around Halloween, I went in to observe the class, and it was all very familiar, and it was clear to me what her teacher meant, even though it had been delivered to me in a really ambiguous and hard to understand way. I watched my daughter just be herself in this classroom, kind of blissfully unaware of what was expected of her. It seems all very innocent, kindergarten and everything, but that's where they start training you how to be a part of society, which, if you're into that kind of thing, that's awesome. But you don't have much choice in this world. But so I'm watching her like do her thing, and watching her teacher get frustrated with her to the point of like near anger, just because she's not jumping to the next thing that's being assigned to her, because they have like little sections in the day or in the afternoon they have to work on. And it was very familiar. A nice thing that can happen with having children is that you can see yourself and you can be reminded of the progression of your own life through viewing them. And I was brought back to my experience beginning kindergarten, and I can see myself very clearly in my daughter. We share a lot of similarities. And I remember being handed like rudimentary mathematics that you're supposed to start in kindergarten. And not being interested at all. So not even bothering. It wasn't clear to me that it was like required. You know? It was clear to me that she was kind of in the same place, and her teacher, besides rubbing me the wrong way, you know, in a lot of ways, clearly didn't understand my daughter. I didn't want my daughter to stay in that school. I wanted her out. And that could be just, it's hard to say when you're dealing with your children because, you know, everyone thinks that their children are God's gift to the planet, you know. Or sane people do. Sane people do. So I wanted her out. I didn't think it was a good place for her, but I didn't think anything was wrong with her. But of course I didn't because I'm her father. And it's very difficult to see your children clearly because I would like to say because of the incredible amount of love that you have for them, but that's not totally honest because there's something besides the love. There's ego involved. Because there's such a reflection of you. You want them to do good. You want them to be smart. You want them to be beautiful because, yeah, I mean, you're smart and you're beautiful and you do good, you know. Or that's how you want to perceive yourself in this world. And you want your children, your offspring, to have that. That's maybe a little ugly, but it's true, and I think it's true for most parents. So I do love my daughter a great deal, and I love myself. And I wanted her out of that school, and her mother, a very fine woman, brilliant and beautiful. We're partnered in raising her. We're not partnered romantically. Didn't want to hear me that maybe the teacher had the problem because she was beginning a career as a teacher and she always heard parents talk about how it was the teacher's problem and that they wouldn't be able to actually see their children. And I had no idea how hard it was to be a teacher with all these kids and blah, blah, blah. Not blah, blah, blah. I'm sure she had points, but we're very, very good at disagreeing. We can disagree very strongly. But I can see myself in my kid, and I could see myself sitting at the kindergarten desk that she was sitting at. I can see the similarities, and a lot of the similarities come down to an attribute that is slowness, like a real slowness that we share that has been like frustrating to teachers and parents and friends and lovers and roommates and a number of people. For instance, like it really can and often does take me an hour to put on my shoes. And I can't tell you where the time goes. It's not like I got distracted and started playing records or something. Like I can sit in the same place, putting on my socks and shoes for an hour. So can my daughter. We can lose weekends just sitting on the toilet. And if there's an apartment where I spend time with my daughter, there's only one toilet. So that's easy for me to see the similarities, you know. Thinking about how we see our children and how we see ourselves in our children and how we want to see ourselves in a positive light. We don't want something to be wrong with our children. It makes me think about a moment in time when I was 17 years old and I was watching television with my father, episode of Nova. It's like a science program that was on, I think it was on PBS. I don't know if it still exists. This one was on neuroscience and neuroscience technology, and they had a guy getting prepared for a CAT scan and being receiving a CAT scan, and it filled me with this crazy wave of like deja vu, but not just regular deja vu, like deja vu mixed with dread and like sickness to my stomach. And it was overwhelming, and I couldn't stop thinking about it and wondering, like, did I have a CAT scan? So I turned to my father and asked him if I had a CAT scan. He said no and fell back asleep. And then I couldn't get out of my head, and I started remembering more and more this experience of being a little kid and getting a CAT scan. And I finally went to my mother, asked her, and she didn't want to talk about it. And I persisted, and she admitted that I had had a CAT scan when I was 6 years old, something like that. And I asked her why I'd had a CAT scan, and she didn't want to talk about it. But she started laughing a little bit, and which is weird. From where I was standing, kind of filled with dread and having like this like repressed memory come up. And finally, she admitted I'd had a CAT scan, and she told me why. She said that I was so slow that they thought that I was retarded, and I'd be given a battery of tests to test my cognitive ability, and the tests were inconclusive, and they couldn't figure out. The jury's still out, trust me. But the tests were inconclusive, so they thought that maybe I just had a brain tumor. And so that's why I got the CAT scan. I don't know if you've ever had one, but I don't even like giving blood for a blood test. This is actually, thinking about it right now, probably exactly why I hate Western medicine entirely and will do anything to stay away from a doctor. Well, a CAT scan, they have to like take your clothes off if you're little and you don't want to take your clothes off in a room full of strangers, and then they this is my memory, so I don't know. They inject something into your ankle, like an iodine solution, and then they lay you on a table, and you get slid into a tube that sends whatever rays through your body to look into your brain to see what's going on. Totally fucking terrifying. Like, I remembered trying to escape. I remembered screaming until I was hoarse. I remembered my father coming into the room and talking me down. And I remember having my clothes put back on and taken to the gift shop, and my father bought me a book of animal limericks and rhymes and photographs of the animals, all these animals from North America. A black hardcover book. I remembered that book, and I had it through childhood, but I didn't remember anything about the CAT scan after I left the hospital, because it sucked that bad. My parents loved me, loved their children, and that couldn't have been anything but painful and frightening for my father too. The whole situation, and so I'm just thinking about what motivated them to go to that extreme to see what was wrong with me. Okay, so it turns out that no brain tumor as a child, just slow. I'm just slow. I've figured out ways to live my life that it doesn't really matter as far as survival is concerned. And actually, I've been able to thrive, by degrees. And I had to think about that is so tempted to sing. I'm so tempted to push it so past the time that she starts playing, and I have to improvise a song on top of it to finish the story. I won't do that. Just thinking about not doing that to my child, you know, having the good fortune to have a child that's so much like me that I can take my experiences and help her, at least in this moment. I don't know what the future holds, and I don't know who she's going to become, you know, but I can use my experience in a way to lessen her potential problems in this world, which is what you ultimately wish for as a parent. Her mother went to talk to the teacher a couple weeks later and came back horrified and wanted to, but she's not a violent person, but she wanted our daughter out too. So we took our daughter out of that school. She's now at a Steiner school, which really suits her much better. And we're both slow.
Kyp Malone. Just to, for a brief scatological host comment, you know, in between you're supposed to say something funny perhaps, and as Kyp was speaking and he talked about sharing his bathroom with his daughter, I kind of thought back to my childhood home, and I think it's incredible, families, how we share bathrooms, because now as an adult, I don't really even like to share a bathroom with myself, and yet, you know, my father, with all his torment, had dominated the toilet for years. So I flash back to that momentarily, and so that's my little host segue for the second. Okay. All right. Our next storyteller, her favorite state is Ohio, and she says because it's a well-rounded state, and I'd wish I'd gone to college there. So please welcome to the stage Starlee Kine.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Is this blocking my face? Okay. I am writing a book about the self-help industry, and I've been writing it for a while. And the point of the book is that I kind of go to different seminars and workshops, and I try to have them fix very specific problems in my life, which are numerous. And actually, they're getting more numerous, like the longer I write the book, to the point where the book itself has become my biggest problem, and it's just become this horrible albatross, and I'm never going to get out or get fixed. And the longer I've written this book, the more self-help begins to kind of show itself everywhere. Like, I never was into self-help before, and then it just kind of started to pop out. And the boyfriend I was dating when I started writing this book turned out to be kind of a secret self-help junkie. Like, I thought he was just like tall and skinny and had like shiny hair, but he was like a self-help fanatic. And he used to, when we woke up, he would find a shaft of sunlight to sit in, like a cat. Like, he would kind of chase the sunlight, and wherever it was, he would sit in it. And then I later read The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle, and it tells you to find a shaft of sunlight and sit in it every day. So my boyfriend was like following Eckhart Tolle's weird sunlight advice and finding it. And then he ended up using The Power of Now to break up with me. So like it had turned against me. And like when he broke up with me, I remember being like, but this morning we had such a good time and we ate breakfast, and what about that? And he told me that I didn't live in the moment enough and I had to stop dwelling on the past. And as ridiculous as I find that, there is a tendency I have to kind of, in bad situations, like kind of, I'm not a positive person, I'm very negative, but I do tend to like hold on for dear life to any good moments and try to make them work. Not in a positive way, but like in a backward survival way. And I told him, I've actually never broken up with anyone myself. I always get dumped, like every single time. And when he was dumping me, I was just like crying and saying like, why do I always get left? Why am I the one who always gets left? And he just looked at me and was so confused, and he was like, because you never leave first. And this same boyfriend ended up, he told me before we broke up about this guy named Brad Blanton who made something called Radical Honesty that my boyfriend was really into. And there's books, and there's also like these seminars that you can go to that are 8 days long. And the idea of, Brad said he's gonna cure us of like our addiction to lying. And I did like the idea of being radically honest, because I kind of feel like I am radically honest, but to me I just thought it was always, I'm just inappropriate, like chronically inappropriate, and I just can't I can't lie even when it's gonna save me, even when it would do me good. Like this same boyfriend, we broke up, and like 2 months later, I saw him on the subway, and he asked me how I was doing, and I was like, I'm awful, you meant everything to me, I'm a wreck without you. And like obviously I was supposed to be like, I am doing awesome, and I have so many boyfriends now, and who are you? I don't even know who you are. Did we met? But instead, I just like told him, like pathologically told him the truth. So then after we broke up, I was like, I should go to Radical Honesty, and at the very least, it would kind of be like a nice vacation where there's other inappropriate people and we're walking around and no one's rolling their eyes at me or sighing or getting mad at me or writing passive-aggressive notes to me. And so I found Brad Blanton's email, and I emailed him, and I was like, can you squeeze me into your September session? Is there any room for me? And he said, yes. He wrote me back from like Switzerland or something, and he was like, yes, and I'll even give you a journalist discount. Instead of $2,700, you can only have to pay $2,000. And I was like, score, awesome. And I booked a flight to Washington Dulles Airport, where Brad's assistant, Jerry, picked me up with Brad's #1 fan, this woman named Anne, who'd been 35 times to these seminars. And the two of them picked me up, and they immediately just wanted to ask me all these questions and be super starey and touchy-feely to me. And I have kind of this love-hate relationship to attention, certain kind of attention. This kind of attention I love. This is great. But I don't like it when it's one-on-one and someone's looking at me too much and wants to ask me lots of questions, and I've just gotten off a plane and I want to just stare out the window and not talk to anybody, and they just had all these questions for me, and I just was very grumpy. And then I thought they would kind of like that because I thought it was radically honest, but they didn't like it, and they didn't like me, and they kind of formed a little clique with each other, and I was clearly not very popular in that car, and I was just very confused about what kind of radically honest I was supposed to be. And then we were also driving forever, ever. I couldn't believe how long we were in the car. The radio station kept changing, kept getting staticky and going to a new thing. And we ended up driving to Virginia, to this little town, Stanley, Virginia, population 1,379. And we pulled up to this driveway, and that's when I realized that Radical Honesty headquarters that I just paid $2,000 to attend was actually Brad Blanton's house. His house, where he lives. And not, my dentist works out of his house in Orange County, California, but it's there's a dental chair and masks and, fillings and stuff, and it's not his TV and bed are not in there, it's a separate part. But Radical Honesty was in his house. There was no separation. The bathroom I used was Brad's bathroom, and there was like dental floss and like rubber bands with like hair on them and grime in there, and like I had to stay in his kid's room, and he was right down the hall, and everyone else was kind of like sleeping on sleeping bags, and it was no order or structure, and definitely no room service. And my room at least had TV, and it was like an old TV, and I like immediately found the channel that plays Law and Order all the time and just kind of put it on that. And then I went downstairs. I was like, I guess I'll try to, I gotta, go be radically honest. And I went downstairs and I met Brad, and he just was disgusting. Like, he was horrible. Honestly, he was horrible. Like, if he was like a cartoon character version of himself, he'd be a toad. Like, absolutely. Like, his face was all like, mouth was all wide, and he had no shirt on half the time, and he was barefoot, and he gave me a huge clammy hug, and he told me he was really happy to meet me, and he like led me into the living room and told me we should all get acquainted. And there were only 7 other people in the living room, including Jerry and Ann, and every single person there had been to a radical honesty seminar before. It was just get acquainted with Starlee. These people knew each other and like seemed to like live in Brad's house almost. One of them actually had like a tent in his yard. And so it was just like me there hanging out, and we sat down, and Brad was like, the first rule of radical honesty is you have to like tell everyone who you really are. And so we had to go around and say like our name, our job, what we made, like how much money we made, because he was all like, people hate talking about money. We had to do that. And then that crafty Brad always throwing the zingers at us. And then we had to say a secret. And so we slowly went around the room. And like the first guy was kind of this outsider therapist, and he said he hadn't paid taxes in 10 years. And then another guy said that he'd murdered a man. like murdered, like really, like was in a truck with this man and like punched him in the head and then threw him out the window, and the guy was dead, and then another car came and ran him over. And then he didn't go to jail, and he like never told anybody except for these people, and was just like confessing to murder. And then Brad was like, next, great. And then, and he went to Ann, and Ann's the #1 fan, and she was like, I don't know, my secrets are so boring. She's like, I guess I can talk again about having sex with my cat on a regular basis. And I was just like, and honestly, I know I'm not a very good journalist because I didn't like do any follow-up questions. I didn't ask logistically how it was possible, and like who did what to who, and why you would do that, and like whether there'd be like peanut butter involved, or like I didn't ask anything. And then the murderer like looked really put out that she maybe was trumping his, and he like raised his hand again, and he was like, also, I've totally felt up my cat, and like it was just like this crazy thing. And then it got to me, and like the spotlight was on me, and I was just like sitting there on the couch, and I was like, well, I totally sometimes buy stuff that aren't on sale, and I like shop too much, and sometimes I'll be meeting someone for coffee, and I'll say that the train broke down, but actually it's because I went into a store and bought a dress. And there was like silence. They were just like, and they just like, I was the freak, like totally, it didn't matter what anyone else said. They were just like, who is this girl who's like not honest with her feelings and also covering things up and has all these boring problems? And Brad just looked at me and he was like, Starlee, what is wrong with you? And I was just like, there was not even anyone to like gesture to, like no one, like it didn't matter, the murder and the cat, they were just like, he's like, what is wrong with you, Starlee? And I was like, nothing, I'm fine. And he was like, I want you to sign. He pulled out this contract, and he's like, Starlee, you clearly are too in your head. Like, you think too much. And he's like, so in order to relieve you of that, I need you to sign this contract that says you will do whatever I tell you for the next 8 days. And I was like, no, I will not. Already, I'm saying no. And he was like, and then he just like had the contract, and he looked around the room, and he couldn't believe me. And then he just stared at me and was like, fuck you, bitch. I resent you for defying me. And again, it was like this, like, there was no one to like make connection, like eye contact with. I was looking, and I was just like, did you just call me a bitch? And he was like, fuck you, cunt. I resent you for getting mad at me for calling you a bitch. And it was like this crazy thing. And then I was like, what are you talking about? And he told me he was at war with my mind. And I was like, I like my mind. And he's like, fuck you, bitch. I resent you for liking your mind. And it just turned into this crazy thing where he just kept telling me to fuck off. And I was just sitting there. And I really think it's because I had just heard about the cat and the murder and the cat again. And like no one was active. And it's like within minutes, I totally turned into like a cult member. And I was just like, okay. And like I thought I was crazy. And I started to cry. And then Brad Blanton started making fun of me when I cried. He literally was like, wah, wah, wah. Look at the baby crying. Like honestly, I'm not kidding. Like he did that. And then I just like, when he did that, I lost it and I like ran upstairs to my room and I was like throwing stuff into my bag and turning off the TV and like, I was like, I have to get out of here, I have to get out of here. But then as soon as I did that, like I picked up my bag and I zipped it up and then like the thing that happened to me was what always happens to me, like in bad situations where I've been like, I start to like falsely romanticize the situation and think that I have it all wrong and that it can't be as bad as I think it is. And I began to feel like nostalgia for the car ride with Ann and Jerry and like attached and like strangely attached to like the bathroom and my new room and stuff. And then, and like I said, it's not like I'm not being positive. I'm just like, I get so attached and I just begin to like doubt so much that I'm making the right decision and I don't want to live with that regret, so I just make really, really bad choices in these situations. So what happened was I just didn't leave. Like I unpacked my bag and I kind of sat down and was like, it's not so bad here, it's actually pretty great. I totally want to be here. It's my fault, like I shouldn't have not killed somebody and set myself up for that kind of treatment. And so I went downstairs and I apologized and Brad told me to fuck off for like 8 more hours that night. And then that was pretty much like how it went for the next 5 days. Like we would like get up, we would do yoga, we would break for lunch, which was like these disgusting like cheddar cheese slices that everyone was touching. And then Brad would tell me to fuck off for like the whole night. And I don't even know what these people did before I got there because like the whole thing was about me. Like they weren't doing anything else except for like watching Brad tell me to fuck off. And finally on the 5th day, I went downstairs, totally beaten down, and Brad was like, Starlee, I have a surprise for you. And I was like, oh good, I can't wait to hear. And he said that normally at the end of Radical Honesty sessions, everyone gets totally naked because they're so in love with each other and they have such a good time. And it's usually this big surprise at the end, but because they didn't trust me to be a member of the group, they were moving Naked Day up to that morning. And I had to decide whether I was going to like participate in Naked Day or not. And I was like, no, I am not going to get naked. And he was like, are you sure? It's awesome and fuck you cunt, fuck you bitch, but also it's this great loving thing. And I was like, I'm not getting naked with you freaks. I'm leaving. I'm out of here. And I like turned around and went upstairs and packed my bag and made sure not to look at anything or think about anything. And I turned my mind off and I was like, I am leaving. And then once I decided to leave, I realized I had to still figure out how to get out of there because I was 2 hours from civilization, and it turned out it's very hard to flee a cult when you've decided to, when you don't have like a rental car of your own. And so then I had to like actually logistically figure out how to leave. And the internet was all spotty, but I ended up getting like there was no cabs in the little town. And I ended up getting like the city council on the phone and being like, do you guys have like a car service of some sort for me? And they're like, no, we don't know what you're talking about. Those words don't make any sense. And I was like, well, the thing is, I'm in this guy's house, and he wants me to get naked, and I really just need a car now. And they were like, we'll see what we can do. And they like hung up. And I ended up having to call a town like 2 hours away and being like, do you have any cabs that you can send to me? And they're like, yes, but it'll cost $200. And I was like, it is very expensive to flee a cult, it turns out, but I guess I will have to do this. And so I signed up for the $200 cab ride, and I waited, and I steeled myself, and I was not going to back down. And then like an hour later, one of the cult people called upstairs, and they're like, Starlee, your ride is here. And I like ran downstairs with my bag, and it was actually the cops. Because the first person at the city council who I said I had to get naked had thought I was like a hostage in a house, and she had called the cops, and the cops were like there outside, like these two cops, and they had like their hand on the gun, and they were all like, don't worry, miss, we've got you, it's okay. And they thought I was like Elizabeth Smart. They really thought they were like rescuing me. And I was like, no, he wants me to get naked. And they would like try to they really wanted to arrest Brad, but I had to explain that it wasn't like illegal kind of naked, it was just gross, creepy kind of naked, and he wasn't actually breaking any laws. And then they were like, don't worry, we'll take you, we're gonna take you to a women's shelter, it's gonna be okay. And I was about to get in the car, but then the cab pulled up, and then I had to like so I went from having no rides to like too many rides. I had to choose between the cops and this cab driver who was so sweet, and then I had to get in the cab because he'd driven so far, and the cops really didn't want to leave me, like they really, really, really wanted to arrest somebody there. But I got into the cab, and the cab's driver's name was James Taylor for some reason, and it wasn't. And then we started driving away, and I started to suddenly notice that it was really pretty there actually. Like I could see out the windows, and I hadn't even looked at the windows before, and I'd been so distracted by Jerry and Ann and ignoring them and avoiding them and where I was going. And it was actually it was Virginia, and it was so nice. And I realized that it was the first time I'd really like quit a situation that was bad for me. Like it was a cult, and it may be obvious to a lot of people, but to me, this was like a breakthrough and like a really big move. And I think the reason I was able to see everything that day was because I was finally living in the moment.
Starlee Kine. I won't say that our other stories haven't been on the topic of America, but that definitely hit America right in the bullseye. So we're going to have our intermission now, but before our intermission, I'm going to read something, and this is very American. The Met's gift shop is open. But now here, and please check out the Moth merchandise table. We have CDs and T-shirts for sale that make great gifts. You can also give someone the gift that gives all year. Was I supposed to read this directly? This is a little, I'm not faulting the writing, Catherine, but it is a little cheesy. Okay. You can also give someone the gift that gives all year by giving them a Moth membership, which includes a free CD and 2 tickets to our annual member show in June. Please support the Moth, which does do wonderful charitable things, and you'll also, this is in here, you'll also get a tax credit, which I'm sure everyone's going to run and get a T-shirt now to get a tax credit. But anyway, that's our intermission. Go enjoy your intermission, and we'll be back and we'll have more stories. Thank you very much. Maz Swift. All right, well, we're almost ready to start our second half. I just want to acknowledge one thing. My little story and then Peter's story talked about Christmas, and since this is New York City and a museum, I do want to acknowledge that it's also, I believe, the 5th night of Hanukkah for the 75% members of the audience who are Jewish. So, I am also Jewish, and I think, in retrospect, that added to my sense of guilt, like, not that I minded celebrating Christmas at all with my son, but I thought, oh, what am I doing, a Jew in the South celebrating Christmas Eve? That's why I'm stuck in the rain. You know what I mean? I made the whole thing biblical and neurotic at the same time. So that's, anyway, I just wanted to acknowledge all the Jews and the 5th night of Hanukkah tonight. So, and then just going on a neurotic tangent just for a moment to work our way back into the show, you know, you get on stage and you feel insecure, especially here where it's like that moment in, not E.T., Close Encounters of the Third Kind. The lights are so bright, I'm telling you. Now I see Catherine's forehead and a photographer here, but that's it. I mean, so we're really telling stories into darkness here, or light. But anyway, I feel a little bit low energy. I feel that I'm definitely having that December kind of sadness where I'm just bereft behind my eyes, and so I want to apologize if any way I do seem dead, but just to be, I guess that's it. I apologize if I seem dead, but I think you're a lovely audience from what I hear, and so I want to thank you for being here. And just one little thought, I don't know, I thought, what could I talk about? But I went to the bathroom just now. There was a secret one. I saw that line over there. I thought, oh my God, there's women who didn't vote in 1910 still on that line. I mean, women really do have it tough. But I snuck into some bathroom back there, and then I washed my hands, and I always like to put water on my face. And ever since I've had a beard for the last year now, or so now, I don't ever worry about my hair being wet because it dries immediately. I'm like a dog with no hair or something. But my beard always stays wet. And then I thought, oh my God, I'm constantly touching my beard. I love to touch it. I get in there. I'm mad about it. I could be like Kyp, you know, when he loses an hour or something. I lose an hour just like playing with my beard. And I was thinking of all the germs I'm constantly loading in here, right into my beard and mustache, right near my mouth. And so even though I'm depressed, I guess I had a moment of self-preservation because I thought, stop touching your beard so much and putting all that swine flu like right there. Just try to control yourself. And so this is what I was thinking, and now here we are. Okay. All right, so let's get back into the show in America. Okay. Kind of you to clap. I also went to my backwards thing. Clap backwards is Palk and camera Arimac and floor Rulf and violin, oh, that's a hard one. Violin Niloev, Maz Azam, Swift Afiwas, chairs Sriak. Okay, I've got all my nervousness out, and nervous is Suovrin backwards. All right, let's get back to the show. Our next storyteller, when asked her favorite state, she said Pennsylvania because it's where I live and where I started to make a difference. Please welcome to the stage Barbie Izquierdo.
We're doing something, right? Everyone came back. So my whole life has been about secrets. I've been taught the importance of secrets since I was little, and how you're not supposed to say anything to anyone about your life because there's consequences to that. And a perfect example of that would be December of last year. I was sitting in the Salvation Army, and I was there to get Christmas gifts for my two kids. I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, but at that time, there were 3 and 1. And I'm sitting there, and I'm number 732 out of maybe 1,000 people. And even though we're all there for the same reasons, no one says hi, no one says, how are you doing today? No one even looks at each other in the eyes. And it kind of felt like we were all there, but we were doing something wrong, like if, we were doing something illegal. And for a moment, I thought of my mom. I felt like my mom. And I say that because my father was in jail for 10 years of my life. So the first 10 years of my life, when Christmas would come around, we would go to this church and we would get the gifts that my dad would send from the jail to the church. So I remember back in the 4th grade, I'm in class and I'm telling Angel, one of my classmates, about the gifts I received that year. And I got a Bible and a hockey stick. So I'm thinking like, okay, my dad knows I'm kind of a tomboy, so he got me a hockey stick, and I'm gonna play hockey, and I'm gonna be the best hockey player ever. I'm gonna be the girl, the best girl hockey player ever. And I'm just telling him about how I'm gonna be the best. And my classmate, Noel, comes along, and he's like, your dad doesn't want you to be a hockey player. As a matter of fact, your dad didn't even send you those gifts. The church gave you those gifts. You're getting those gifts because you're poor. So there I was, sitting in the Salvation Army with these 1,000 people, and I was poor. So about 5 hours later, I was waiting to get my gifts. They give me a trash bag and send me home. I go home, and that day it was like absolutely just pouring rain. It was crazy the amount of rain that it was. It was just pouring, pouring, pouring rain. I get home, and I'm absolutely drenched to the fact my shirt, my pants, everything was covered in rain. So I live in a 2-bedroom home, and mind you, I have 2 kids, so we just live in this 1 bedroom. And we don't have space for anything, so all of our clothes and their toys are stored in the basement. So I get in the house, I'm holding the bag, and I'm gonna take my clothes off, so I start heading down to the basement. I open the door, and I kinda, sorta see something, but it's like I don't wanna see it, so I just turn off the light. So take a breath, and I turn on the light. And there's water everywhere. My kids' socks, our clothes, just floating by. My daughter's favorite toy, her Dora 4-wheeler, was still plugged in from being charged the night before. And the wires were just floating. So I close the basement door, and I try to just go back into the living room. And I remember I stopped in my tracks. And I hold up this bag, this trash bag, that might as well have just had my pride inside of it. And I look at it, and I just think, how is this possibly going to make up for everything I just lost? So Christmas goes by, and I feel bad just because I had to go to the Salvation Army to get these presents, because I was working at the time, but I was making $2 over the income limit to receive any assistance from the welfare office, but I was making too little money to get by with my kids on my own. So Christmas goes by, and because of the water, the pilot light went out. So I had no heat in the home. As a matter of fact, the whole winter, I had no heat. Because I had no heat and my kids were so young, my daughter was only 3 years old, and to this day, she doesn't know the difference of how when it's cold outside, it's not supposed to be cold inside. And because it was so cold, my son started to get sick. So my son starts to get sick, and I'm thinking, what can I do? I take him to the ER, just because I didn't want to wait for an appointment with the doctors because they didn't have any walk-ins. You actually had to make an appointment. So I take him to the ER, and they tell me he has problems with his vision. So I start to get a little scared, and I think about how when I had this water in my basement, and I tried calling the Salvation Army to get this help, but I stopped myself because I thought about how I might get my kids taken from me. And my mom got her kids taken from her. I have 2 brothers that to this day I haven't met because they were taken from her. So I'm sitting in this ER, and this lady comes up to me and she's like, "Hi, I just want to ask you a couple questions. Would you mind? I'll give you a $10 gift card from Target. You can totally answer anonymously." And I'm thinking about all these secrets I'm holding inside, and I'm like, should I tell? Should I not tell? Consequences. I'm not going to tell. So I say, I'm sorry, I don't want to answer the questions. The next time I go to the ER, they tell me that my son has blocked tear ducts. The lady comes back, she's like, "Hi, would you mind answering these questions? I'll give you this $10 gift card. You can answer anonymously." When I think about it, no, I don't want to answer the questions. The next time I go into the emergency room, they tell me my son might go blind. He was to the point where at times he couldn't open his eyes. From it being so cold, the mucus from his eyes will build up to the point where he would try to pull them apart and they wouldn't open. So that day, here comes the Target lady. "Hi, would you like to answer these questions?" And she kind of stopped herself and really looked at me, and she kind of knew I was going to say no, but she still finished telling me, you can answer anonymously. And that day, I had to let it out. I had to tell my secret. So I answer her questions, and I tell her about how I can't afford to feed my kids. I tell her about how I go days reading pizzeria menus and just looking at the pictures to get rid of my hunger pains, just so my kids can eat. I tell her how I don't have enough money to pay the bills, but I have all these bills. I tell her about the house with no heat throughout the whole winter. All of these things just kept bursting out of me as if I was giving birth to a child, and it was just kicking and screaming, and my voice was just coming out. And I stood there with my head down, and because of what I was taught, I was waiting to be scolded. I was waiting for my parents to just come bursting in like, "What are you doing? You're not supposed to say anything." But it didn't happen. And at that moment, I learned that you can talk about what's going on in your life. And I always had this saying throughout my whole life with everything that I've been through. I've always said that I wanted to genuinely smile. I didn't want to smile, not that I didn't want to smile because of my kids, but I wanted to feel like I can smile on my own. And that lady I met that day in the hospital was from Witnesses to Hunger. And not that she gave me a voice, but she gave me an ear to listen. And ever since that day, telling my story in front of so many people, I can finally smile.
Barbie Izquierdo. Thank you for your courage to tell your story, and it was beautiful. All right, before our last storyteller, I want to thank all our storytellers that we've had tonight. Peter, Kyp, Starlee, Barbie, I think that's it. Are those all the names? Yeah, let's hear it for all our storytellers. Our musician, Maz Swift. the Metropolitan Museum of Art, especially Harold Holzer, Morgan Holzer, Tom Zidell, the producer of Tonight Show, Kate Tellers, the directors of Tonight Show, Catherine Burns and Jennifer Hickson, and the executive and creative director of the Moth, Leah Tao. Thank you very much to all of you. In my blindness, I saw the photographer here, and for some reason, I don't know why, for years, ever since school, I clapped like this, but I thought, oh God, she's taking a picture, and I'm looking totally insane clapping like that. So anyway, it'll be documented, and no one will ever see it, but for a moment, I felt insecure. Okay. So our last storyteller, his favorite state is the state of New York City because it's not part of America. Please welcome Antony Zito.
My grandfather was born in the Bronx in 1913, and part of an Italian immigrant family. His parents came over on the boat, and he had to leave everything that he knew, his family and his home, and travel north to Hartford, Connecticut, where he took up working at his uncle's monument shop. It was a business that was started in 1870, and it was specialized in family monuments, gravestones, markers in the local cemeteries. My grandfather did okay with it. He managed to, support his family and get along okay. He was known as an honorable businessman and dedicated craftsman. And when my father grew up in the 50s, here came a guy who was much more of an artist. He was a painter. He loved to draw and sculpt and build things with his hands. And he worked summers and weekends at the shop. And then he went on to go to the Hartford Art School for college to study sculpture, where he met my mom, who was an Italian girl there learning about painting. And as time went on, he saw his life ahead of him and realized that he wasn't that interested in being a monument guy. He said to my grandfather, I'm an artist, and I really want to do my own thing, so I don't really think I'm going to be doing this full time. My grandfather, of course, was crushed. This business meant everything to him, and he and my father had a bit of a time over it. There was a rift between them, and they practically disowned each other, which was tough because, like most Italian families and a lot of other families, we were very close. And so my father kind of went on and did his own thing. He was teaching figure drawing classes, and he was doing landscaping with using his stone sculptures. And for a time he did okay, but when it came down to it, he realized he didn't quite have enough coming in to support his young family, and he eventually, quite reluctantly, returned to the shop and started working again for my grandfather. My grandfather, of course, was ecstatic. His only child, his only son, was there working with him again, and my father kind of threw himself into it and really turned the place around from a sort of old world monument shop to an establishment that became known for creating really beautiful sort of classical monuments, Corinthian columns and Egyptian obelisks done to the perfect proportion. He was a true classicist, and he knew this stuff inside and out. He always said to me when I was a kid, you should go out and do what you want to do with your life because you don't want to get stuck into something that's not right for you. My brother came along several years later, much more in the same manner as my grandfather, was a craftsman and a businessman. He ended up taking over the business, which he still runs to this day. And I have always been like my dad, an artist, a painter, a sculptor, And when I was a kid, my dad was always there to teach me everything I could ever want to know about art. We would pour through art history books, and I learned more than half the kids in my college class knew about these things. And he would always take us to all the greatest museums in the area. Of course, we always came straight to the Metropolitan. We ran right up to the European painting section, and then straight down to see the Egyptians and the Greeks and the Romans. He and I worked together side by side in the studio painting. And eventually, I went off to school in Western Massachusetts where I studied painting, of course. And I started to hear a little sort of thing from my brother every once in a while, kind of to the T of, I'm here working in the family business. I've taken it over. I'm doing the right thing and, waiting for you, basically. And I kind of shrugged it off because I wasn't really going to give it a whole lot of attention, because I knew without a doubt that I wasn't going to end up there. Hartford, if you've never been, don't. It's a hellhole. And my family, like I said, was very close, but when they got within the doors of that shop, they might as well have been a pack of wild dogs, because the bickering was just insane. And I always hated that. So there were two good reasons for me not to be in Hartford. I did appreciate a lot of things about the business. There was this sort of old world quality about the work that was done, and this real sense of antiquity and just this like old school shop. I always loved that. But when it came down to it, I was going to take my dad's advice and go out and do what I wanted to do with my life. So I ended up here in New York, Halloween night, 1992. I arrived at my new apartment in the East Village, not because I knew anything about the East Village or the 80s art scene or any of the good stuff that goes along with it, but because I found the cheapest apartment I could find in 1992 that happened to be in the East Village, believe it or not. So I dove right into it. I found myself accidentally in the perfect place to be. I got right into the art scene, the music scene. I was playing in a band, and I was putting on art shows, and we would take over places like the gas station on 2nd and B, which was had been an open, empty lot that these sculptors had taken over and just created a massive wall, fence, piece of welded together car parts and motorcycles in midair, industrial debris, and everything they could find. A catwalk spanned across the space, and we'd have artwork in the open lot there, and we'd have the bands playing, and there were burning barrels and multicolored, haired, freaked individuals hanging from the railings, and it was a really amazing time for me. We did all sorts of, we put on all sorts of fun exhibits and shows. We did one night we dragged all of our amps and guitars and drums and lights and speakers up to the center span of the Williamsburg Bridge and played a show in the pouring rain out over the East River. And it was times like that when I felt really most alive and so far from this sort of odd shadow of death that kind of cast over the little monument business in Hartford. And I was just so glad to be where I was. And the first time I ever hung a painting, it was at a little dive bar in the East Village called the Mars Bar. It was a dark, dingy, ugly, smelly, insane, disgusting, fantastic little place where you could go in there and do whatever you wanted. You could write on the walls and draw on the ceilings, and there was hard drinking, hard drugging, end of the line. The dirty old men were there in the daytime, and the rowdy punk rockers there at night. It's still there. You can go there and check it out if you dare. But I had taken to painting these more or less classical portraits of people I'd met and people I'd known on materials I found on the street. So I would pick up cabinet doors or broken mirrors, tabletops and trays, whatever I could find, and paint these more or less traditional portraits on them. So it was kind of like a Manet meets Duchamp in the East Village kind of thing. And I still do a bit of that, I guess. And there I was, really kind of having the time of my life, maybe overdoing it just a little bit, but I was enjoying myself. But all the while, every so often, I would get this phone call from my brother, and it'd be like, hey, you know, I'm still here. I'm taking on the family legacy, carrying it on my shoulders, this responsibility, the family business. And, you know, are you done yet? You know, when are you coming back? And he was upset that I hadn't come back. And I was just as determined to stay where I was and do what I wanted to do. And we talked about it, and it got a little nasty at times. I told him, you know, you made your choice, I made mine. I'm just doing what I need to do. You're doing what you need to do. And, you know, it got ugly, which was hard because, again, we were a pretty close family. And so I would hang up the phone, get right back to my life and shrug it off and move on and head down to the Mars Bar. And there would be, behind the bar, a new barmaid who just came into town, Japanese cowgirl by the name of Reiko. She kind of popped up out of nowhere, as people do in these little scenes downtown, and she was fun. It was really well liked. Everyone kind of got along with her. She could dish it out and take it with the dirty old men and the crazy punk rockers. And there was always a monthly art show that went up on the walls of the Mars, and someone would put up a flyer saying, this is what the deal is. Bring in your work. It has to somehow, on some level, have something to do with this theme, kind of like this show, really. Pretty loose. And so the new show was called the Gamma Ray Collection, and it was spelled Gamma Ray Collection. Her name was right there in the middle of the title of the show, and this was clearly a show about her. So our challenge was to come up with some kind of artwork having to do with our new friend from Texas. I painted a portrait of Reiko. She came to my studio, which was in my apartment at the time, and rifled through the debris that I had supplied anyone coming to sit, and chose to be painted on a sort of stenciled image on canvas of Don Quixote at the end of the trail. He was slumped lifeless on his horse with a broken spear, a sunset, a windmill in the background. In retrospect, quite an ominous, odd thing to be painted on, but, you know, death is cool, and so it was just part of the deal. I painted her on it with a sort of dramatic light cast on her face. The shadows from her eyelashes were playing across her cheek, and it was hung up in the show, the Gamma Ray Collection, and a week later, I got a phone call, and I heard that Reiko had died. No one really knew her all that well. She was from out of town. We didn't know even her last name, to be honest. And she died of a drug overdose, which was not entirely uncommon in the East Village in the 90s. But it was always a shock to hear it, and especially someone so young and really upbeat, and no one knew, I certainly didn't know, that she was fooling around like that. So we didn't quite know what to do. There was this eerily prophetic art exhibition on the wall behind where she used to stand, and we just decided we would have a little memorial for her in one of the East Village gardens. Someone took my painting down off the wall and carried it to the garden, and we stood around remembering her. And as I stood there, it kind of occurred to me in a strange way, this portrait I had painted turned out to be a bit of a monument. And I realized that as far as any of us might want to get away from where we come from or the legacy that we've been offered, maybe we don't ever, really. Thanks.
Antony Zito. Well, that's our show. To close out and to send you into the night, as some of you have come to the Moth or seen me perform, I always end the shows with a Harry call. It's the sound my friend and I would make on the playground when being attacked by more normal children. And so it's kind of a cry for help, which most of you can identify with. So I'll do 3, and we'll call it a night. I'll step away from the mic, even though I just perfectly adjusted it. So here are 3 Harry calls, and thank you again for being such a lovely audience, and thank you to the Met. It's a beautiful room, and thank you for having the Moth here. So 3 Harry calls. Thank you.